So today God is saying that, He's been leading me to, so I'm just out walking and it's really icy out, so I'm trying to not like hit an icy patch here. He's been leading me to watch like prison shows, like prison documentaries, and he's just been telling me, like, I've heard lots of testimonies lately too of where people were in prison and they say that they were in prison and they found God, right? And God put it on me to say that he does that on purpose. And so there's a deeper message to that, is that sometimes he uses what appears to be like hardships to bring you back to him. So obviously if you end up in prison, like actual jail prison, you were leading a not very good life, right? If that's where you ended up. And of course, at first, there's going to be a feeling of despair and hopelessness, especially if you don't know the Lord. But he's saying that obviously not in all circumstances, but sometimes that's a blessing in disguise. And we hear that common saying, blessing in disguise. And that's kind of what it means, is that some things that are actual blessings don't look like they're blessings. So sometimes you being married and your husband leaving you or something, if he's abusive, that's a blessing. Now, it may be hard at first because you're on hard times financially, things like that. Maybe you were dependent. But eventually, with God's help, he's going to lead you to him and lead you through it, right? Same with being in prison, is that at first you're going to be feeling depressed and despair, especially if you don't know God. But he always has a point and purpose. I've even heard of stories of people saying that they weren't a believer. God had them fall, right? Like slip and fall at work or get hurt or whatever, or even encounter a sickness where they're bedridden. And throughout that resting time of their broken leg or broken back or post-surgery or post-illness or whatever it may be, say even cancer or something, they come to know the Lord, right? And then miraculously, that prisoner gets out early because of good behavior, and he had good behavior because he found the Lord, right? Whereas had he still had his angry, aggressive side to him that he had when he first went in, he might not have gotten released on good behavior because he might have added more time to his sentence by acting up in the jail, right? Same with the example of the lady whose husband leaves her, and God's not going to tear up marriages for no good reason. If he's tearing up a marriage, it's most likely because there's something wrong with the marriage. It's abusive, or there's adultery or something like that, right? And so, of course, if you've been, say, husband or wife, doesn't matter, either side, married to said spouse for just, say, 10, 15 years, and you've had children with them and everything, you're a different person now, right? And you maybe have changed and you're not seeing things for how they really are anymore, right? And the Lord has put you on that hardship or that hard time. It looks like struggle. It looks like hardship, and I'm not saying it's not in the moment. But if you have God with you and you go through those struggles and hardships, you can identify that these are just blessings in disguise, right? So if you're a believer and the Lord tears up a friendship in front of you, as a believer, it must not have been right for me. That person must not have the best intentions for me, because God doesn't take away things from you that are good, right? He only takes things away from you that are not good for you. So if you have a friendship for, say, 5 years and you become a believer, and a year later the Lord removes that person in any said way, you can rest assured as a believer that there was a reason for it, a good reason. And maybe you don't see it because maybe that person is in your face acting like they care and they're a good person and all this. But as a believer, you know that God's always got your back. So therefore, you know that he's not going to just come out of nowhere and just rip up a good friendship, right? Especially if you'd been friends with that person in the past when you weren't a believer. So if he's ripped it up, it's for good reason. And same thing goes with a relationship as well, right? If it's a good, healthy, equal party relationship, the Lord isn't going to just tear that up just because. And as a believer, you know that. So you can, if you already have Jesus in your heart and you walk with the Lord, you can easily let things come and go, ebb and flow, because you already know that what's for you will come to you and stay with you, and what's not for you will leave you. Because God is always working as your bodyguard. He's always bringing you what's best and taking away what's not, right? Like a filter almost. Whereas if you don't walk with the Lord yet, sometimes he'll come to you in ways that look like hardships and bad situations and struggles, but really, truly, they're just blessings in disguise, right? Then when you become a believer, not only are you given the gift of salvation, but now moving forward, if you encounter any more obstacles in your life, and you guaranteed you will, that look like some more hardships and struggles, you know that's the Lord working in your best interest again. So say for instance, you weren't a believer and your spouse wasn't a believer, and you got into a marriage and it turned toxic, and you're guilty, they're guilty, and it just wasn't healthy anymore. And maybe the other party was, treating you worse than you were treating them. And the Lord knew that at a certain age and a certain point in your life, you were going to become a believer and you were going to turn your life around. But he tried to get your attention, over the course of that marriage, over the course of the last 10, 15 years, but you weren't heeding his direction. So he had no choice but to put you, literally sit you down, in a hospital bed, or, like at home, where you lose your job, and then you're having to look for work for a couple of weeks, something like that, or something happens to a family member, so that you have to kind of be alone with your thoughts. And because the Lord knows that when we're healthy, mentally, physically, emotionally, we are apt to fall into sin, and Satan knows that too. Just like the story of the prisoners, right, where when they were healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, they weren't using their time to better themselves. They were using their time to run the streets and sin. And the Lord gave them warning after warning, because the Lord always warns us, until eventually he got tired of being ignored, and he did it for your best interest. A lot of people think that the Lord does these things for his own glory, and yeah, he does. He moves so that he can get the glory out of it. But once you become a believer, you come to know and understand that that's part of it, yes. But another part of it too is he's doing it for you, for your best interest, what's best for you, right? And when you're not a believer, or you're lukewarm, and you're going through those hardships and hard times, it looks like the Lord's against you and that he's just trying to screw up your life. And I can relate to that. I understand that. But once you go through and you allow him to teach you and guide you, and he does, you'll eventually see that he works all things out for your good, even those bad things, right? And ultimately, his will prevail no matter what. So if his will and intent and purpose is to have you become a believer, then you will become a believer at the end of those hardships. And then he gets that glory, but then so do you, and then his will is done, right? On earth as it is in heaven. So I've just been, reading testimonies lately about prisoners that say, like, I was homeless, I was addicted to drugs, I had a bad childhood, dead-end relationships, and I ended up finally getting caught up. Or even I ended up, getting into a fight and getting really badly hurt. Situations where the Lord basically moved in his divine way. He intervened, and it was a blessing in disguise, where ultimately he sat that person down, whether it was in a prison cell or a hospital bed or at someone's funeral, and because they were down, either mentally, physically, or emotionally, it allowed them that quietness, because you need to have that peace and quietness in order to be able to move for the Lord, hear the Lord, get close to the Lord, right? And once that was achieved, then they followed the path that the Lord had for them, which was ultimately to become a believer. And then that lady who was in that bad marriage, maybe they can reconcile, or maybe she goes on to meet the true partner that the Lord had for her, right? And then now she's in a better spot. All because she was able to work her way through that hardship that was dealt to her, what she thought was a bad hand. She dealt through it with the Lord's help. She came to know the Lord, and he brought her through. Just like how he did with so many characters in the Bible, right? That I always talk about. Same with that prisoner. Now the prisoner got to know the Lord, and he got out early on good behavior, and now he's able to go and make something of himself, have a better life, like a second chance at a better life this time with the skills he learned being in jail. that he would not have learned had he not sat in jail for a year or two. If he'd been out on the street still, he would have just kept on, doing the criminal life that he had been living and that he was used to. Same with, so I've been hearing so many miracle stories and testimonies lately of the Lord miraculously healing people, stage 4 cancers, right? Stage 4 cancers, diseases and debilitation that people have had for many, many years. They got sick of themselves enough, they sat down on themselves long enough that the Lord was able to communicate with them and get through to them. And then once they became a believer and got saved, it was no time at all until the Lord saved them, healed them, and turned their situation around. And I have yet to hear of a testimony of somebody doing worse, where, hey, I had this bad situation, I was sick or I was in jail, and then I got to know the Lord and things got worse for me. I have yet to hear a story like that. And if somebody thinks that that is their story, then you haven't walked with him long enough yet. You ducked out premature, because that's not how he moves. So anyway, I was out for a walk. It's a beautiful day today, a little bit icy out though, but he just has been putting it on me lately to keep my eye out for these testimonies that I've been encountering via people's comments on YouTube, and also through watching these different documentaries, hearing people's backgrounds and stories. And not every single person that goes to jail gets saved, and not every person that goes through an illness or sickness gets saved, right? But he's been pointing out to me those that have, and how their life got turned around, and how it was a blessing in disguise, how what they thought was a struggle or a hardship, and granted at the time it was, but that the Lord he's bigger than that. He moves in bigger ways than that. And fortunately for us, because he can see the future, he knows, you might be in prison today, but he knows where you're going to end up in 5 years. You might be sick today in the hospital, but he knows where you're going to be in 5 years. Not every bad hand you get dealt is meant to take you out, is meant to just mess you up mentally, physically, emotionally, Sometimes these things are blessings in disguise, where the disguise is looking like hardship, and it is, and Satan loves those situations because he can work his best in situations where we feel down, but in reality, it's actually a blessing, and it's meant. I've even heard stories where, people have been lonely and looking for love, and they broke down on the highway, and they're all mad and angry because it's minus 50 out, and they got their kids, and they left their cell phone at home, and they're broke down. And I mean, that's a bad situation for anyone, is it not? But the person that stops to help them, or the tow truck driver, ends up becoming their future spouse, right? So I don't know where I'm going with this. The Lord just put it on me to make a video, but just know that if you are currently going through any hardships, you never know what the silver lining may end up to be. And if you're not yet, but you will in the future, maybe go back to this video as a reminder of what it really could be. And that sometimes if you see people around you, if you have a family member that's going through an illness or, a prison sentence, we, of course, our automatic reaction is to at first get really, upset, mad, angry, scared, things like that. But, the whole point isn't for that. The point is is to turn things around, in our favor, right? When the timing is right. And the Lord moves everything in his own time, even the hard situations, the good situations, the blessings, all of it works out in the end for our better good, because the Lord does everything for our best interest, right? And nothing less. So I hope this finds you well. I hope it blesses you, and God bless.